Of all the nations in recorded history, very few have earned the haunting title of the graveyard of empires. Afghanistan is one of them. From Alexander the Great to the Persian kings, from the Mongol hordes to the mighty British Empire, and even the Soviet Union in the 1980s, every invading power that set foot in this rugged land eventually fell. No matter the strength of their armies or the size of their fleets, none could bend Afghanistan to their will. Strategists will tell you the secret lies in its unforgiving terrain. Towering mountains, labyrinthine valleys, endless networks of caves, perfect cover for guerrilla warfare. But what if the story doesn't end there? What if the true reason empires bled and broke in these mountains was not just terrain, but something far more terrifying? Something buried deep in history that no military textbook will ever admit. Fast forward to October 2001. After the devastating 9/11 attacks, the United States launched Operation Enduring Freedom. Thousands of American troops poured into Afghanistan, determined to dismantle the Taliban and crush al-Qaeda. Backed by overwhelming air power, U.S. forces expected a decisive victory, but instead of surrender, the Taliban melted into the mountains, drawing soldiers into a brutal war of attrition. And it was here in those dark caves of Kandahar that an American patrol vanished without a trace. When their brothers in arms went searching, what they discovered defied every rule of modern warfare. It wasn't just insurgents waiting in the shadows. Witnesses described something out of myth, a towering figure with fiery red hair, armed with nothing more than a primitive spear, yet capable of tearing through an elite soldier like paper. This is Combat Reports, and tonight, you're about to hear the story the U.S. military tried to bury the chilling account of the giant of Kandahar. For centuries, Afghanistan has stood at the crossroads of civilizations. Great conquerors marched their armies through its deserts and mountains, dreaming of adding this land to their empires, yet almost every attempt ended in disaster. Alexander the Great managed to push into the region in 330 B.C., but his campaign bled manpower and resources until his successors abandoned the dream. Centuries later, the Persians tried and failed. Even the Mongols, known for leveling entire kingdoms, struggled to tame Afghan resistance. In the 19th century, the British Empire, then the most powerful force on earth, waged 3 separate Anglo-Afghan wars. Each time, Britain suffered catastrophic losses in the unforgiving passes and mountain strongholds. Soviet Russia learned the same bitter lesson in the 1980s. Despite deploying more than 600,000 troops over 10 brutal years, the Red Army withdrew in defeat, scarred by a conflict they could never win. Why did all these superpowers crumble here? Terrain is only part of the answer. Afghanistan's geography is a natural fortress mountains stretching over 75% of the land, valleys that twist and vanish into nothingness, and cave systems that can conceal entire armies. Local fighters mastered guerrilla tactics, striking and vanishing before foreign soldiers could respond. To outsiders, it was a nightmare battlefield. And then came September 11, 2001. After nearly 3,000 innocent lives were lost in the deadliest terrorist attack on American soil, the U.S. declared war on terror. Within weeks, President George W. Bush launched Operation Enduring Freedom. American forces, supported by British, Australian, and Canadian allies, stormed into Afghanistan with overwhelming air power, precision weapons, and elite special operations units. Their mission: dismantle the Taliban regime and destroy al-Qaeda's network. At first, it seemed unstoppable. The Taliban fell from Kabul in a matter of weeks. Their government toppled almost overnight. But just like the invaders of centuries past, the Taliban retreated into the mountains, particularly in Kandahar, the symbolic heart of their movement. From there, they waged a relentless guerrilla war, ambushing convoys, striking patrols, and using the terrain itself as their weapon. For the soldiers sent into these rugged valleys, every patrol carried the weight of history. They knew empires had died here before. What they didn't know was that, In early 2002, one patrol would stumble onto something even deadlier than hidden insurgents. By early 2002, Kandahar had become one of the most dangerous regions in Afghanistan. Coalition forces knew the Taliban were using the mountains as safe havens, moving supplies and fighters through a maze of caves and narrow passes. To disrupt these networks, U.S. commanders relied heavily on search and destroy missions. Small teams of Special Operations Forces, Army Rangers, Navy SEALs, and Green Berets were sent deep into enemy territory, tasked with locating insurgents, destroying weapons caches, and gathering intelligence. One of these teams, inserted into the rugged Kandahar Mountains, never reported back. At first, headquarters assumed radio trouble, a common issue in terrain where valleys cut off communications. But as hours stretched into a full day without contact, concern grew. These were elite operators trained, disciplined, and equipped with advanced gear. Radio silence from an entire squad was almost unthinkable. A second Special Forces team was deployed with a grim mission: find their brothers in arms. Whether it meant recovering survivors or bringing home bodies, they would not leave anyone behind. The men who boarded the helicopters that morning knew the risks. They had studied history. They had been briefed on the Taliban's deadly ambush tactics. Yet none of them could imagine what truly awaited in those mountains. The mission began like countless others, boots crunching on dry soil, rifles scanning the ridgelines, UAVs buzzing overhead. But as the team pressed deeper into the range, something felt different. Villagers whispered strange warnings, refusing to guide them further. Even seasoned operators sensed it, an unease that went beyond the threat of Taliban fighters. Hours later, they would stumble upon the first signs, a trail of broken gear and shredded uniforms, leading them toward a discovery that would defy everything they had ever been trained for. As the search team climbed higher into the mountains, the silence grew heavier. The familiar sounds of distant gunfire and echoing explosions seemed to vanish, replaced only by the crunch of boots and the whistle of the wind. Then one soldier spotted something half buried in the dirt, a torn fragment of camouflage fabric. On closer inspection, it was part of a uniform. Not enemy gear, American issue. Within minutes, more pieces appeared. A broken helmet, a shattered rifle stock, scattered magazines still half loaded with ammunition. It was as if the missing squad had been ripped apart and strewn across the rocky path. Yet, there were no bodies, no signs of a firefight, only fragments of gear that looked as though they had been torn violently from their owners. The trail led upward, twisting through narrow passes and steep inclines, each turn revealing more grisly clues: shredded boots, bent dog tags, even a flak vest with deep puncture marks that no standard blade or bullet could have made. The men exchanged uneasy glances. They had seen plenty of ambush sites before, but nothing like this. Finally, they reached a plateau overlooking a cluster of dark caves. What lay scattered in front of those caves made even battle-hardened soldiers pause. Piles of bones, hundreds of them bleached white by the sun, tangled with scraps of clothing and gear. Some were human, others were harder to identify. For a moment, the team assumed they had found a Taliban stronghold, a site where prisoners had been executed and dumped. But something about the scene didn't fit. The sheer number of bones, the unnatural breaks, the strange size of some of the remains. It all pointed to a predator, not a firing squad, weapons raised, nerves on edge, the men prepared to enter the caves. What they didn't know was that the caves were not hiding insurgents. They were home to something far older and far more deadly. The soldiers approached the cave mouth in silence, rifles steady, eyes locked on the shadows ahead. The piles of bones still weighed heavily on their minds, but training kept them focused, step by step. They advanced until a sound shattered the silence. It was a roar, not the crack of gunfire, not the echo of an explosion, but a raw, primal scream that shook the valley. Before anyone could react, a massive figure burst from the darkness. What they saw defied belief. Towering more than 12 feet tall, with fiery red hair tangled around its face, the creature looked like something out of an ancient legend. Animal skins hung from its shoulders, muscles bulged beneath weathered skin, and in its hands it clutched a spear longer than a man was tall. Its teeth gleamed in the sunlight, bared in a feral challenge. For a heartbeat, the team froze, staring at a nightmare they couldn't process. Then the giant charged. In seconds, it closed the distance with terrifying speed. The nearest soldier raised his rifle, but too late. The spear pierced straight through his torso, lifting him clean off the ground. His scream echoed as his body was flung aside like a rag doll. "Contact! Contact!" the squad leader shouted, and the valley erupted in gunfire. M4 rifles, SAW machine guns, and grenade launchers thundered, the sound bouncing off the cliffs. Tracers lit the air as the men unleashed everything they had into the giant. But it didn't fall. At least, not at first. With each round that slammed into its chest, the creature staggered, yet it kept moving forward. It swung the massive spear with bone-crushing force, smashing against rocks and narrowly missing another soldier. The sheer power behind each strike made even seasoned warriors recoil. 30 seconds of relentless fire felt like an eternity. Dust and smoke filled the air, the roar of gunfire mixing with the giant's guttural screams. Then, finally, the beast faltered. Its steps slowed, knees buckling as bullets tore into it. With one last defiant bellow, the creature collapsed, crashing to the ground with earth-shaking force. Silence followed. The only sounds were heavy breathing, the ringing in their ears, and the metallic ping of empty casings hitting stone. The squad gathered around the fallen creature, disbelief etched across their faces. It was massive, easily 3 times the size of an average man. Its skin was thick and coarse, its hands enormous, each one tipped with 6 fingers. 2 full rows of jagged teeth gleamed from its gaping mouth, still twisted in rage even in death. The stench that rose from its body was overwhelming, a mix of sweat, blood, and something ancient. Bravo 2. Sitrep crackled the radio. The team leader hesitated. What could he even say? Finally, he forced the words out. 1 KIA, enemy combatant, neutralized. But sir, it wasn't Taliban. It was... He stopped, then muttered the only word he could manage. A giant. Command didn't believe him at first, but as the team secured the area, their disbelief would be tested again. Because the real horror wasn't just what they had killed, it was what the scene around them revealed. The bones, the torn uniforms, the missing patrol. This thing hadn't just attacked them. It had eaten the men who came before. The men stood in stunned silence around the corpse, their rifles still smoking, adrenaline still surging through their veins. One of them muttered what everyone was thinking. What the hell was that thing? None had an answer. All they knew was that one of their brothers lay dead, impaled by a spear wielded by something that shouldn't exist. Protocol demanded they radio command immediately. The squad leader keyed the handset Bravo 2 to talk. 1 KIA. Multiple rounds expended. Target neutralized. A pause, then a clipped reply. Roger that. Confirm description of target. The operator hesitated. How do you explain to higher command that you've just killed a giant? He finally spat it out. Repeat. Target was not Taliban. Stand by for details. Tango was a very large man. Correction. Giant. Over. Silence on the other end. Then, in a voice that sounded more confused than calm. Say again. Did you just report a giant? But there was no time for disbelief. Within hours, a Chinook helicopter thundered into the valley, carrying loading pallets, harnessing gear, and a specialized recovery team. The squad watched in uneasy silence as the body was wrapped in an oversized tarp, bound in heavy rigging, and winched into the cargo bay. The stench filled the air as the enormous form was secured to a 9X7 aircraft pallet. The soldiers expected the corpse would be flown to Bagram Airfield or a local phobie for analysis. Instead, they were ordered to remain silent. Upon returning to base, Each man was debriefed individually, then handed a non-disclosure agreement. They were told never to speak of what they had seen, not to family, not to fellow soldiers, not to anyone. And just like that, the giant of Kandahar vanished from official record. The men never saw the body again. It was as if the creature had been erased from existence. Yet the memory of what they witnessed couldn't be erased. And in the years that followed, others would step forward with stories just as unsettling. The story of the Kandahar giant might have ended there, sealed away in classified files, buried under paperwork and silence. But whispers have a way of escaping. In 2008, 6 years after the reported firefight, a startling new account surfaced. This time, it didn't come from the soldiers on the ground. It came from the skies. An anonymous pilot of a CH-47 Chinook helicopter agreed to an interview on Coast to Coast AM, a late-night radio program known for exploring the strange and unexplained. His voice was calm, almost reluctant, as he recalled what he had seen. "When we landed," he said, "the recovery team was already there. The thing was huge, wrapped in a tarp, strapped to a standard aircraft pallet. Even under the cover, I could see its hands and feet. The feet alone were nearly 30 inches long. The pilot estimated the creature's height at 12 feet, maybe more, and its weight at around 100 pounds after subtracting the rigging. He wasn't speculating. He had flown the body himself. When asked where it was taken, he admitted he wasn't sure, but believed it went to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, a facility long associated with secret research projects, including UFOs. That testimony could have been dismissed as rumor if it weren't for what came next. In 2009, another soldier came forward, this time from the Kunar province in northeastern Afghanistan, deployed as an infantry team leader. He was issued a new thermal imaging device, the Recon 3. While scanning a valley, he noticed a massive heat signature standing upright on a ridgeline. The trees in that area were 10 to 12 feet tall, but the figure was taller, moving with long, effortless strides. "I couldn't believe it," he later wrote. "It moved slowly, but covered ground faster than any man. Its size was beyond human. At the time, I thought my eyes were playing tricks, but when I later heard the story of the Kandahar giant, every detail came flooding back. 2 witnesses, different years, different regions, yet their descriptions matched. Towering figures, unnatural size, speed that defied logic. And they weren't the only ones. More testimonies trickled in, soldiers recalling red-haired giants, locals whispering about ancient beings in the mountains, hunters claiming to see shadows that didn't belong. One detail stood out in particular: the fiery red hair. Not only did the Kandahar giant have it, but Afghan villagers were known to dye their hair, and even their goats, the same bright orange red. Was it cultural mimicry of something older? A tradition born from encounters with beings long forgotten by history? The puzzle pieces were stacking up, and they pointed to one chilling possibility: the soldiers in Kandahar hadn't encountered an isolated freak of nature. They had stumbled into the realm of something far older, something with roots that stretched back into myth itself. For many of the soldiers who witnessed these beings, one word echoed in their minds: Nephilim. In the book of Genesis, the Nephilim were described as giants, offspring of fallen angels and humans, towering warriors who roamed the earth before the Great Flood. Biblical scholars often dismiss them as allegory, but to the men in Afghanistan, the resemblance was too close to ignore. The physical details matched eerily well. The Kandahar giant was said to have 6 fingers on each hand, a trait often linked to giants in ancient lore. Its 2 rows of jagged teeth recalled descriptions from Near Eastern myths of man-eating titans. And that fiery red hair, it wasn't just coincidence. Local Afghan tribes have, for generations, dyed their hair and even their goats a bright orange red. To outsiders, it seems like nothing more than cultural style. But could it be a memory, an echo of something older? Were they imitating the terrifying giants their ancestors once feared, or honoring them, even outside Afghanistan? Stories of red-haired giants surface across cultures. Native American legends speak of enormous, flame-haired cannibals that once roamed the land, eventually hunted and driven into caves. In Ireland, folklore tells of the Fomorians, monstrous red-haired beings defeated by ancient heroes. The pattern is undeniable. Across continents and centuries, the same image returns: enormous warriors, fiery hair, a taste for human flesh. Were these myths born from the same reality the U.S. soldiers stumbled upon in Kandahar? Or are we looking at something even darker, an ancient species that never truly vanished, lurking in the shadows of history? Whatever the truth, one thing is clear: Afghanistan may not just be the graveyard of empires. It may also be the last refuge of a legend as old as mankind itself. So what do we make of it all? The official record is silent. No after-action report, no acknowledgement, no photographs released. Yet the testimonies remain: pilots, soldiers, and villagers, all describing the same terrifying figure hidden in the mountains of Afghanistan. The Kandahar giant may never appear in history textbooks, but for the men who stood face to face with it, there's no question it was real. Afghanistan has always been the graveyard of empires, a land that humbles conquerors and swallows armies whole. Perhaps terrain alone explains it, but perhaps the truth is stranger: that something ancient still lingers there. Something humanity has been telling stories about for thousands of years. Giants in the Bible, red-haired monsters in Native American lore, warriors in Irish myth. They may not be myths after all. And that's what makes this story so haunting. If even part of it is true, then history isn't what we've been taught. There are missing pages someone may have torn out on purpose. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you believe the Kandahar giant was real? Was it a lost remnant of the Nephilim, or just a legend exaggerated by fear and battle stress? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone. And if this story sent chills down your spine, don't forget to like this video and hit subscribe. Because in the next episode, we're going even deeper. Afghanistan's mountains hold more than giants. There are reports of glowing lights, unidentified craft, and encounters that soldiers swore could not be explained by any weapon on Earth. History isn't just the dates and battles you learned in school. It's the hidden side, the part they tried to erase. And here, together, we're bringing it back into the light.